November 14, 1942. 10:14 p.m., the Dallas Athletic Club parking lot. The click of a Zippo lighter is the only thing cutting through the humid Texas night. Ivy Methvin leans against his dark sedan, the flame illuminating a face etched with the kind of lines only a decade of looking over your shoulder can carve. He exhales a plume of blue smoke into the damp air. The streetlights are dim, flickering with the buzz of dying filaments. Somewhere in the distance, a police siren wails, a lonely, haunting sound that makes Ivy's hand drift toward the pocket of his wool overcoat. He isn't a young man anymore. The ghost of 1934 follows him like a shadow he can't outrun. Then, the sound. The crunch of gravel under heavy leather soles. Not one person, but two. 3. "Ivy," a voice rasps from the darkness. It's a cold voice, devoid of the southern hospitality Dallas pretends to have. "It's been 8 years. We thought you'd moved on." Ivy doesn't turn. He knows that voice. It belongs to the deep pockets and long memories of the Chicago outfit's southern reach. He had survived the wrath of the law after betraying the most famous outlaws in American history, but the law isn't who he should have been worried about. To understand how a man survives a death trap with Bonnie and Clyde, only to end up in a dark parking lot 8 years later, you have to understand the price of a life. In the criminal underworld of the 1930s, loyalty wasn't a moral, it was currency. And Ivy Methvin had spent every cent he had to buy his son's freedom. The rain begins to fall, a light, greasy drizzle that coats the asphalt in a sickly sheen. Ivy finally turns, the cigarette dangling from his lip. He sees the silhouette of a Thompson submachine gun, the Chicago piano. "I did my time with the state," Ivy says, his voice steady despite the hammer of his heart. "The state doesn't set the interest rates on a betrayal like yours, Ivy," the man responds. The hammer clicks back. May 19th, 1934, 2 a.m. A dirt track outside Gibbsland, Louisiana. The smell of pine needles and stale gasoline fills the air. Ivy Methvin is sitting in the back of a stolen Ford V8, his son Henry beside him. In the front seats, the most wanted couple in America, Bonnie Parker and Clyde Barrow. Bonnie is humming a jazz tune, cleaning her fingernails with a pocket knife. Clyde is staring into the rearview mirror, his eyes restless, paranoid, fueled by a year of narrow escapes and high-speed chases. "We move at dawn," Clyde says. His voice is a thin reed. "Ivy, you keep watch by the truck. If you see a glimmer of a badge, you light that signal fire." Ivy nods, but his mind is elsewhere. Earlier that day, he had stood in the shadow of a courthouse and met with Sheriff Henderson Jordan. The deal was simple. Give us Bonnie and Clyde, and your son Henry walks. No chair, no life sentence. A clean slate for the boy who had followed the Barrow gang into a bloody cul-de-sac. Ivy looks at his son. Henry is barely 20, his face gaunt from life on the run. This is the weight of a father's decision. To save the blood of his blood, he has to spill the blood of the people who call him family. "You okay, Pa?" Henry whispers. "Fine, son," Ivy lies, just thinking about the road ahead. The road ahead was a line of 6 lawmen hiding in the bushes with bar rifles. Ivy knew exactly where they were. He had helped pick the spot. As he stepped out of the car to fix a flat tire as the sun began to rise, he felt the crushing weight of the theme that would define his life. Lealtad versus sobrevivencia. He chose survival. But the problem with selling your soul to the law is that the criminals you didn't betray are still watching. The Ford V8 rumbles to life. The trap is set. May 23, 1934, 9:15 a.m., Highway 154. The birds stopped singing. That's what Ivy remembers most. One second, the Louisiana woods were alive with the sound of morning. The next, a suffocating silence fell as the tan Ford V8 rounded the bend. Ivy stood by his own truck, the hood popped, looking like a stranded motorist. This was the lure. Clyde slowed down. He saw Ivy. He trusted Ivy. "Hey, Ivy, need a—" Clyde never finished the sentence. 167 rounds of ammunition tore through the morning air. The sound wasn't like the movies. It was a rhythmic, mechanical tearing, like a giant sewing machine ripping through sheet metal. Ivy dove into the ditch, pressing his face into the mud and rotted leaves. He smelled cordite and iron. He heard the screams, short, sharp, then silenced by the sheer volume of the fusillade. When the firing stopped, the silence was worse. The smoke cleared to reveal the Ford, unrecognizable, slumped in the dirt. Ivy stood up, his legs shaking. He saw Sheriff Jordan and the legendary Frank Hamer emerge from the brush, their faces grim, their guns still smoking. "It's done, Methvin," Hamer said, looking at Ivy with a disgust he didn't bother to hide. "Go get your son." Ivy had won. Henry was safe. But as the crowds began to gather, as people started snipping locks of Bonnie's hair and pieces of Clyde's blood-soaked clothes for souvenirs, Ivy realized he had become a ghost. He was the man who traded the legends for a quiet life. And in the 1930s, the only thing people hated more than a killer was a snitch. The local papers called him a hero. The streets called him a rat. And in the smoky backrooms of the Dallas underworld, where the Barrow Gang had roots and the Mafia had ears, a price tag was quietly placed on Ivy's head. August 1938, a nameless diner in Shreveport. Ivy Methvin sits in a corner booth, his back to the wall. He always sits with his back to the wall now. He's working as a mechanic, his fingernails permanently stained with grease. He thinks the world has forgotten. He thinks the headlines about the death of the Barrow Gang have yellowed enough to be buried. A man in a pinstripe suit sits across from him without asking. He doesn't order food. He just places a heavy gold ring on the table. "You're a hard man to find, Ivy," the stranger says. "I ain't hiding," Ivy grunts, though his heart is thumping against his ribs. The outfit doesn't like it when people work with the Federals, sets a bad precedent. Bonnie and Clyde were small time, sure, but the way they went out, that brought too much heat to the South, too many Rangers, too many eyes on our roots. The man leans in. The smell of expensive cologne clashes with the diner's grease. "You didn't just kill 2 outlaws, Ivy. You broke the code of the road. People are talking. They say you got a reward." "Hey, we think that reward belongs to the guys who lost business because of your noise." Ivy realizes then that the clean slate the law promised him was a lie. He had traded one cage for another. The mob didn't care about Bonnie or Clyde's lives. They cared about the disruption. Ivy was a loose end in a narrative of power. "I don't have no money," Ivy says. "Then you have time," the man replies. "But time runs out for everyone." The man leaves. Ivy looks at his hands. They are shaking. He decides to move again. Another city. Another name. But the shadow of the Ford V8 is longer than he thought. January 1941. Deep Ellum, Dallas. Ivy is back in the city where it all began. He's using his real name again, thinking he's finally safe. The war in Europe is heating up, and the world has bigger problems than a 7-year-old betrayal in Louisiana. He's working as a driver, moving goods, some legal, some not, for local businessmen. Dallas in the early 40s is a city of neon and shadows. The blues clubs of Deep Ellum provide a constant soundtrack of heartbreak and horn sections. Ivy likes the noise. It hides the sound of footsteps. He's sitting in a bar called the Silver Dollar when he sees a familiar face. Not a mobster, but an old associate of Clyde's, a man named Ted. Ted looks at Ivy with a mixture of awe and loathing. "You're still breathing, Ivy? I heard you were at the bottom of the Sabine River," Ted says, sliding a whiskey toward him. "I'm a survivor, Ted." "Survival is expensive," Ted whispers. "Word is, the old Barrow associates, the ones who didn't get the chair, they still talk about you. They call you the Judas of the Pines. And the syndicate? They're using your story as a lesson. Don't be an Ivy." Ivy takes a long drink. The burn of the alcohol matches the burn in his chest. He had saved Henry, but Henry was now a broken man, haunted by the same ghosts. Was it worth it? The theme of reputation starts to weigh more than gold. In this world, a man without a name is nothing, but a man with Ivy's name is a target. "Let them talk," Ivy says. "I'm still here." But as he walks out into the cold Dallas night, he notices a black Buick parked across the street. It follows him for 3 blocks before vanishing into the fog. June 1942. A warehouse near the Trinity River. The humidity in Dallas is a physical weight. Ivy is tasked with overseeing a shipment of rationed rubber tires, black market gold during the war. He's working for a man named Big Joe Lombardo, a middle-tier fixer for the Chicago-Kansas City pipeline. Joe calls Ivy into his office. The room is thick with cigar smoke and the rhythmic ticking of a grandfather clock. "Ivy, you've been good for me," Joe says, gesturing to a seat. "Reliable, quiet. But I got a call from New Orleans today. It seems a certain group of people who remember 1934, found out where you're earning your paycheck." Ivy feels the cold seep into his bones despite the heat. "Joe, that was a long time ago. I was saving my kid." "In our business, family is why you don't talk to the cops, Ivy. Not the reason you do." Joe sighs, leaning back. "They want a percentage, a betrayal tax. If I keep you on, I'm paying for your sins. And I'm a businessman, not a charity." Joe reaches into his drawer and pulls out an envelope. "This is your last pay. Get out of Dallas. Go to California. Go to hell for all I care. But if you're still here by the end of the year, I can't protect you." Ivy takes the envelope. The paper feels like lead. He realizes he is being squeezed out of every corner of the world. The Efeto lender had turned him into a pariah. Even the criminals were disgusted by his brand of survival. As he exits the warehouse, he sees the black Buick again. This time, the driver doesn't turn away. He just stares. A silent promise. October 30th, 1942. Ivy's apartment, 3 a.m. The window shatters. Ivy is off the bed before the glass hits the floor, his hand gripping a .38 caliber revolver. He stays low, crawling toward the window. Outside, the street is empty, save for the flickering orange glow of a Molotov cocktail burning on the sidewalk. Pinned to his door with a steak knife is a newspaper clipping. It's an old photo of the Ford V8, riddled with holes, written across it in thick black ink. "Time's up, Judas." Ivy sits on the floor, the adrenaline fading into a weary, soul-deep exhaustion. He is 58 years old. He has spent 2,920 days waiting for this. He thinks about Henry, who moved away and changed his name, living a life of quiet desperation. Ivy did this for him, but in the process he had poisoned the air they both breathed. He realizes he can't run anymore, not because he can't physically move, but because there is nowhere left that the story hasn't reached. The legend of Bonnie and Clyde had grown, fueled by movies and folk songs, and as they became heroes of the poor man, Ivy became the ultimate villain. He decides he won't die in a gutter. He dresses in his best suit. He polishes his shoes. If they are coming for the man who killed Bonnie and Clyde, he will meet them like a man who has nothing left to lose. He makes a phone call. "I'll be at the athletic club on the 14th, he says to the voice on the other end. "Let's finish this." November 14th, 1942, 10:18 p.m., the Dallas Athletic Club. We are back where we started. The cigarette is a nub. The Thompson submachine gun is aimed at Ivy's chest. The three men move closer, their faces obscured by the brims of their hats. "You chose a fancy place to die, Ivy," the leader says. "I wanted witnesses," Ivy replies, his voice raspy. "I wanted people to see that even after 8 years, you're still afraid of a man who did what was right for his blood." "Right?" The man laughs, a harsh barking sound. "You sold your friends to the executioner. There's no right in that, there's only the bill. And tonight, it's due." Ivy reaches for his pocket, not for his gun, but for a flask. He takes a slow, deliberate sip. The rain is heavier now, washing the grime of Dallas into the sewers. He looks at the men and sees not just assassins, but the physical manifestation of his own guilt. "Do it," Ivy says. "But remember, I saw them die. I saw what 160 bullets do to a person. You think you're tough? You're just janitors cleaning up a ghost story." The man with the Thompson steps forward. The tension is a wire stretched to the breaking point. This is the moment where the theme of Poda shifts. Ivy has no physical power, but his lack of fear unnerves them. They expected him to beg. "No more talking," the leader whispers. But a car turns into the lot, its headlights blinding them for a split second. Ivy dives behind his sedan. The silence of the night is shattered, not by a Thompson, but by the roar of Ivy's .38. He fires from behind the wheel of his car. The muzzle flashes, lighting up the rain like strobe lights. Bang, bang, bang. One of the men screams, clutching his shoulder. The Thompson opens up. Rat-tat-tat-tat-tat. The windows of Ivy's sedan explode. Glass rain showers over him. The sound is deafening in the enclosed space of the parking lot. Ivy feels a hot iron sear across his ribs. He's hit. He rolls under the car, the cold, oily water soaking his suit. He can see their feet, 3 pairs of boots moving in a flank. He's pinned. This isn't a movie. There are no reinforcements coming. The Judas of the Pines is alone in the dark. "You're bleeding out, Methvin," the leader shouts. "Make it easy." Ivy gasps for air, the copper taste of blood filling his mouth. He thinks of the Louisiana highway. He thinks of the birds that stopped singing. He realizes the birds are stopping for him now. He has 1 bullet left. He aims at the shadow nearest the rear tire. He pulls the trigger. A heavy thud. Someone hits the pavement. "Damn you!" The Thompson barks again, a long, sustained burst that shreds the tires and the fuel tank. Ivy closes his eyes. He has lived 8 years longer than he should have. He had seen his son reach adulthood. He had paid the price of his reputation. "I'm coming, Clyde," he whispers to the dark. November 15th, 1942, 6 a.m. The sun rises over Dallas, but it's a grey, sickly dawn. The police tape flutters in the wind. Ivy Methvin's body is draped in a white sheet, turning pink as the blood seeps through. The detectives find the newspaper clipping in his pocket. They find the empty flask. They find a man who spent nearly a decade running from a single morning in Louisiana. The news doesn't make the front page. There are bigger deaths in 1942. But in the underworld, the message is sent. The man who betrayed Bonnie and Clyde finally stopped running. The debt was settled with interest. Ivy Methvin didn't die because of the law. He didn't die because of his crimes. He died because he broke the only law that matters in the shadows, the law of silence. The parking lot is cleaned. The cars are towed. But for years after, drivers at the Dallas Athletic Club would claim to hear the faint sound of a Thompson submachine gun on rainy nights. A reminder that some betrayals don't have an expiration date. Ivy Methvin bought his son's life with the lives of his friends. In the end, the cost was his own. In the world of outlaws, survival isn't the victory. It's just a longer wait for the inevitable. What do you think? Was Ivy a hero for saving his son, or did he deserve the fate that waited for him in that parking lot? Let me know in the comments. If you enjoyed this dive into the dark side of history, hit the like button and subscribe for more stories, where the legends are real and the consequences are deadly. See you in the next shadow.